Hi, my name is CJ. There is a pandemic going on in case you somehow missed it. I have not been able to do my job as a theater artist since March, really. I got furloughed from my other job back in June. I haven't received any income from unemployment since October. I got surgery 2 months ago and I'm still recovering from that. And Christmas is coming. It used to be, and at least for me, I can't speak for absolutely everybody, but it used to be that Christmas time was a quick and easy express train to Serotonin Central. But I can't do that right now, because I'm not even allowed to go on trains right now. So I have to squeeze serotonin out of Christmas from within all 750 square feet of my apartment. What's the way I decided to do that? Why, it's simple. I'm going to watch as many adaptations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol as I possibly can. The rules are going to be simple. I watch a Christmas Carol adaptation, gonna talk to you about what I liked and disliked about it, and then I'm gonna rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. So go put on your favorite holiday-themed pajamas, plug in some sparkly lights, hop on the couch, and listen to me talk about different Christmas carols for a while. Mickey's Christmas Carol. I like this one. It's 25 minutes long. It just really gets right to the point with it, and that's all you need to do. When Jiminy Cricket says, "Oh, I thought you liked looking down on your fellow man," 17 of my chakras opened, which was super convenient. The decision to make Goofy play Jacob Marley is a bold choice. Not a bad choice, but a bold choice, because he actively not only swindled widows and the poor in his life, but is proud of the fact. My one qualm is that I don't understand why it's called Mickey's Christmas Carol. Unlike the Muppets Christmas Carol, Mickey is not the sole storyteller of this Christmas Carol. He plays Bob Cratchit, so it doesn't make sense for him to be the sole Christmas Carol. Maybe they could have named it Disney's Christmas Carol or something. I don't know. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. Scrooge, or A Christmas Carol. It got changed when it moved to the United States. It was made in the UK, and then they changed the title. It was made in 1951, and it starred Alistair Sim as Scrooge. I enjoyed Sim's Scrooge as somebody who just did not care. He is not outwardly actively malicious. He does not find the whole thing funny. He simply just does not care about his fellow man. I also really liked that his character was not necessarily one who was resistant to change just because he outright thought he didn't do anything wrong, but he's resistant to change because he thinks it's too late for him to change. He says it a few times. He asks the spirits why they would even bother coming to him, because he's too old now to change. It's too late for him. I will say there were at least 19 different backstories for Scrooge. The past segment took such a long time. I don't need to hear about the 17th business decision he made that was not in the best taste. I get it. He's just a shrewd businessman. You can communicate that in fewer words. Critic A.O. Scott called this the best Christmas Carol adaptation of all time, and that's good for A.O. Scott, and maybe it is. I personally didn't feel that way. It was good, but I feel like I've seen some stronger ones in my research. But it was still fine. I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. It just has a lot of very slow moments, I think. Next up, if you loved the 2019 film Cats but wish that the song Beautiful Ghosts lasted just a little bit longer, then you are going to love Dolly Parton's Christmas on the Square. Oh boy. This film stars Christine Baranski as the Scrooge-esque character named Regina, and I do have to hand it to her. She really does try. Like, you can tell she is genuinely trying everything she can here, and I do not think the film earned her effort. I can't even understate how many times I screamed, "Wait, what?" while watching this movie, because it is both impossibly ludicrous and also does absolutely nothing to earn the amount of ludicrous it is. Like, it's campy, but it doesn't have the camp. There's a part of this movie where Dolly Parton, playing an angel curses a woman's uterus. And I know that there's a better word for that, but I refuse to call anything in this film a blessing in the traditional sense. One of the lyrics of the inspirational song is, and I'm reading off the thing, "Dreams are of no value if they're not equipped with wings. So secure yourself for climbing. Dolly, do you want me to climb or do you want me to fly? As long as you keep giving money to the COVID vaccine, I'll do whichever, but you just have to make up your mind, please. Please, Dolly, please." Overall, I am giving this movie like a -3 out of 10. It is the longest 98 minutes I have ever experienced in my life, and I just had surgery 2 months ago. The 1997 animated A Christmas Carol starring Tim Curry and Whoopi Goldberg. This is a rough watch. The animation is very challenging. Tim Curry sounds like he chain smokes menthol cigarettes through his nose, and Whoopi Goldberg's British accent sounds like she's trying to sneak into an R-rated film. Scrooge has a pet dog in this one. Its name is Debit. Also, fun fact, when I watched this one on Amazon Prime, I turned on the captions because I watch movies with captions, and I noticed that the captions seemed to be for an entirely different movie. Like, it was like, "Oh, Santa, I can't believe you're retiring," and I was like, Santa is also not in this one. So I turned off the captions, and I was like, let me try again in a couple of minutes, and then a couple of minutes later, I turned them on, and they were like, "I have to have something that all of Robotropolis can see," and I was like, okay, now I have a bit more of a hint that maybe this is not the film, and I looked it up, and the captions were for the 1996 TV special Sonic Christmas Blast. Good accessibility, Amazon. I straight up almost walked away from recording this part without giving this one a rating. I'm gonna say a solid 3 out of 10. Hey, here's a really interesting question, and content warning for ableism if you don't want to hear about that today. There's a lot of different adaptations. I don't want to call any one out, but I'd say there's a solid few adaptations where Tiny Tim is only shown to have a crutch, and the nature of his disability or illness is not explained in any other way besides he uses a crutch. And the entire narrative is like, he's going to die. That's a sign he's going to die. And Scrooge is always like, oh no, he's using a crutch. Spirit, how long is Tiny Tim going to live? Using a crutch is not a sign that someone is about to die. The film and the television needs to give a little bit more language than that. Tiny Tim actively, getting winded from very slight activities, having coughing fits and stuff like that everybody around him, very visibly worries about. That is a sign of perhaps a respiratory illness that could prove to be terminal. Using a crutch is not that! I don't know. I feel like we could just do a better job of representing disability in film. Let's respect our disabled siblings, shall we? 1984's A Christmas Carol, starring George C. Scott. I loved George C. Scott as Scrooge. There are a lot of different ways to approach Scrooge. Many of them are very cartoonishly antagonistic, and that is a valid approach to do, especially if you're doing like a children's rendition. But I loved that George C. Scott's Scrooge was just a guy who happens to be a jerk. I especially love that some of Scrooge's most notoriously evil lines, like if they're going to die, they better do it and decrease the surplus population, George C. Scott delivered with a laugh to very horrified recipients. It was sort of that very particular brand of cruelty that you do see a lot today and in the present of, haha, right? You agree with me, right? Yes, I feel comfortable saying this to you because obviously we both feel this way. Isn't this funny? Like, he genuinely thinks that other people are going to find that funny. And they don't. And it's beautiful. The sound score and the music heightened absolutely everything. I absolutely loved it. Overall, this was just a super, super, super great adaptation. Loved it a bunch. Give it a solid 9 out of 10. A Christmas Carol That Goes Wrong, made in 2017 by the same folks who did the Broadway play, A Play That Goes Wrong. This is less of a Christmas Carol adaptation in the traditional sense, and a bit more of a loving nod to A Christmas Carol while a bunch of actors just play in the space. If you're the type of person who has anxiety dreams about it being the night of a show, and apparently you're supposed to be in the show, but for the life of you, you don't remember rehearsing it, and you don't remember getting a script, and somebody just hands you a script, and you're just looking at the script backstage, desperately trying to figure out what the lines are, because, like, you know the show's sort of in the back of your head, but the more and more that you think about it, the more you can't really remember what it is, and then all of a sudden you're on stage, and, like, everybody's looking at you, and you can't even talk. Then this is the program for you. It's hard to rank it on like a scale of it being a good Christmas Carol adaptation because it's not really, as I mentioned. So I'm just gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I had a good time watching it. I wouldn't watch it for the same reasons I'd watch any other Christmas Carol. Watch it for goofs. Watch it to see a bunch of people falling down. So I have to wear Under Armour while I'm recovering from surgery to compress my chest. So half the time it feels like I'm like, this is sponsored by sports. Sitting around on your couch watching hours and hours of A Christmas Carol adaptations is the ultimate sport. A Christmas Carol, the musical, which was filmed in 2004. This one stars Kelsey Grammer, who, fun fact, in real life is a Trump supporter, so I did get the privilege of seeing Scrooge play himself in the beginning. As I mentioned, this one is a musical, though I have to say that I didn't like the filming of it. It felt very disjointed, particularly during the group numbers, like they weren't sure what angle to switch to at what point. There was a part where there was a tap number, but none of the tap dancers were wearing tap shoes, just regular shoes. So you have this great tap number and it just sounds like... It's also really funny because it's a musical. Scrooge sings like for 5 minutes in the beginning, and then a caroler shows up, as they are wont to do in adaptations of A Christmas Carol, and starts caroling at Scrooge, and he's like, stop that singing and that music! And it's like, Kelsey Grammer, I just heard you sing. Like, I know how diegesis works, but it still felt funny. I did like they did this cute little thing where, before the ghosts show up, they actually show up as townfolk that Scrooge interacts with and refutes, so there's kind of like a foreshadowing thing there. It's really, really, really blatantly obvious, but it's cute. It's cute. I thought it was cute. Overall, I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. I was gonna give it a 7, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I did tear up a little bit at the end, which doesn't happen for me a lot when watching A Christmas Carol, so they got me. Disney's A Christmas Carol, 2009, starring Jim Carrey as not just Scrooge, but as all three Christmas ghosts. Having Jim Carrey play all of those as well as Scrooge is a strong artistic choice on paper, but then when you get to your 2009 motion capture animated film where there are and again, Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, can't really see them, but the Ghost of Christmas past and present, you can very clearly see their faces and hear their voices, and all of those also belong to Jim Carrey. That's not great a lot of the time. It's just very hard to handle. There are actively moments where you're watching it and it's just two Jim Carrey faces, but they look a little different, and two Jim Carrey voices, but they sound kind of different, but it's all Jim Carrey. As Ebenezer Scrooge, Jim Carrey, who was about 47 when he played the role, sounds like he took a lot of character inspiration from Mr. Burns, and then toward the end gave it like a Scottish brogue. The second that anything moves in the movie, it looks like a cutscene of a video game. And I'm not trying to be too hard on it because it was a 2009 film, and it's probably the same what happened with Avatar, where it was absolutely groundbreaking for the time, but now 11 years later it just looks so miserable. But if you perhaps are not a fan of the uncanny valley, if you do not like to travel that road, proceed with caution. There are definitely some moments that I had to take a step back because it felt very difficult to watch. If you were to watch this movie for anything, watch it for the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come sequences, mostly because that's the only time Jim Carrey interacts with a ghost where it's not just another Jim Carrey. But also it's spooky, scary fun, and I loved it. The rest of the movie, you have to go through a lot of forest to see the edge. So I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. And with that 4 out of 10, just envision in your mind the true fact that for the motion capture for Tiny Tim, they had Gary Oldman do it. I actually saw a production of A Christmas Carol live last year where they had the intermission break right after Marley's ghost visits Scrooge. And this production, Marley's face was very grotesque. There were really loud noises and stuff. It wasn't terrible, but it was pretty scary, and it's live and all that. And I was sitting in front of a child and their parent, and when the lights came up for intermission, I overheard the child ask the parent, "Are there going to be more ghosts in this show?" And the parent said, yeah, there will be more ghosts. They mentioned there's 3 more ghosts. And the child said, "Are they all going to be as scary as that one?" And they sounded a little concerned. And the parent was like, "I don't know how they'll look. They might be scary. They might not be scary. Is that okay with you?" And the child thought it over for a little bit and then resolutely said, "I would like to color in my coloring book now." And sure enough, the entire intermission, they colored in the coloring book together, and they stuck around for Act 2. Children are a lot more emotionally intelligent than we give them credit for. Given the proper tools, they are able to communicate their needs. And I feel like in another situation, had the parent not handled it the way they did, by giving the child the agency to opt in and out, they might have just left and never seen Act 2, never seen any of the other ghosts or Scrooge changed. They got to experience it because the child was able to verbalize their needs. So I think scary stuff should absolutely be accessible to kids if they want to see it. I mean, me as a kid, I did horribly with it, and I still do today, so it's not going to be a 100% shot that they're going to be great with it, but I think that if one was to introduce a child to the concept of horror and like fear and all of that, A Christmas Carol is a really good way to do it. A Christmas Carol, the 1971 animated feature starring Alistair Sim for his second time playing Scrooge. I really loved his work on this one 2 decades after his first one. I think that he brought something new to Scrooge. He really matched the tone of the animated feature and did some terrific work. I almost sort of like his work on this one more than the 1951 one, but, you know, I could be easily swayed on that. But enough about Mr. Sim and his great work. Let's talk about the animation, because it is just absolutely stunning work, which makes sense because it was created by Richard Williams, who is a very famous animator. There were 1 or 2 occasions where I was like, this animation feels weird. Like, Fred comes in and he's like, Christmas a humbug! Jeez! But then you get to Marley's ghost, and oh my god. I don't even want to spoil. Go on YouTube. If you don't want to watch the full thing, which it's 25 minutes, just go knock it out. But if you don't want to watch the full thing, go look it up on YouTube and then just fast forward to Marley's ghost, because it's just very cool what they've done with that scene. That might so far be my favorite Marley's ghost scene. I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Great work, Richard Williams. Let's talk about Barbie in A Christmas Carol, the 2008 film starring Barbie, this snobby performer that's very snobby and runs a theater company, I guess, and is trying to force everybody to rehearse on Christmas Day. Everybody gets mad at her about that, and then the spirits show that if she goes through with that and then fires them all when they're late on Christmas Day, then not only does she lose everything she owns, but her friend, the costume maker, gains prominence as a clothing designer and becomes just as selfish as Eden was. So there's a lot of stakes, actually. And it's a Barbie movie. The framing device is that Barbie is trying to convince her little sister Kelly to go with her to this Christmas Eve charity ball, but Kelly doesn't want to because she wants to do the same stuff they do every Christmas Eve. So she's like, I hate Christmas. Why can't we do the same thing we did every Christmas Eve? And Barbie's like, well, let me tell you about somebody else who didn't like Christmas and also had completely different circumstances than you 8-year-old child. And I really like that they actively addressed the whole conundrum of telling a story where the main protagonist is a not great person. Like, they actively send the message that it's important to tell the stories of people who make mistakes so that we can learn from those mistakes, and that people are complex individuals who can seem very needlessly mean at the face value, but then it turns out that they had a really tough past, or there's a reason they're being mean, or stuff like that. It introduces the idea of the complexities of humankind in the Barbie film. Also, this is the second, so far, Christmas Carol adaptation I've seen where the Scrooge character has a pet. This time it's a cat. And first of all, I don't know if it undercuts the whole, like, Scrooge doesn't really have anybody who truly loves them message by having a living creature who depends on them and, like, is always attached to their hip. And also, I don't know, I don't have kids, and it's been a while since I've been a child, so, like, do kids find it funny when cats and dogs fight? Because that's in everyone. I'm just curious. Anyway, I would give this one a surprised 5 out of 10. It was going to be lower because the animation is exactly what you would expect from a Barbie film. It's not good, and it's tough to look at. And the writing is like, alright, but I do really like how they changed this one to suit their brand. It was smart. It was smart. Good job, Barbie. She can do any job she wants. She's an astronaut, a doctor, a clothing designer, and one of the many, many, many prolific performers to play the role of Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge, made in 1970, starring Albert Finney as Scrooge. So, fun fact that I didn't know, this one's a musical. I especially didn't know for the first 10 minutes, because there's no musical numbers for the first 10 minutes. And then suddenly Bob Cratchit starts singing. You can imagine my confusion. And I'll be perfectly honest, I really wasn't into a vast majority of the musical numbers. Most of them completely halted the action of a movie that already wasn't moving forward very quickly. For example, just to provide context, Mickey's Christmas Carol is 25 minutes long. So they just tell, in 25 minutes, the full story of A Christmas Carol. The first 25 minutes of this movie, Scrooge hadn't even made it to his house yet. It got to the point where I, who went to school for musical theater and work in musical theater, would hear a song start and go, oh God, not another song. That's it. The song, Thank You Very Much. I really liked that one. I wish they kept the energy for the rest of the movie. It did sort of undercut Scrooge's redemption to have the bit be where everybody in town absolutely hates him and he doesn't realize that. But the song was really fun. So you know what? I'll take it. I also really liked that Scrooge's redemption scene when he goes to visit the Cratchits. Instead of tricking Bob Cratchit, a father of a poor and starving family with a disabled son, into thinking he's about to get fired and then being like, just kidding, I'm actually giving you a living wage. That's the joke, I'm good now. And you didn't know that. So funny. This time he shows up dressed as Santa Claus and gives everybody the gifts and then is like, surprise, it's me, Scrooge. Not to slam Dickens, but I think that version is a lot less, haha, get it? Bob Cratchit, my starving employee, I'm gonna treat you like a person now. Merry Christmas. In this one, Scrooge goes to hell. He goes to a very 1970s hell. And Marley's there, and he greets Scrooge and is like, oh, you're gonna work for Lucifer, who is now a character in the universe of A Christmas Carol. And then he leads Scrooge to the office of Lucifer, which is kept cold, unlike the rest of hell, and also rats are there. And then Marley's like, oh, here comes your chain that you have to wear. It's unimaginably heavy. Instead of letting the audience just imagine how heavy the chain is, several burly, oily men drag in the chain and wrap Scrooge in it. And then he wakes up. And I don't even hate it or love it. I was just delighted to see it. There's just so much going on with that. And I gotta say, I think that affects the score in some way, because I was about to rank this one pretty low. Especially since I couldn't understand a word that Albert Finney said at any point. I think I have to give this one a 6 out of 10. And I think 4 of those points are for Scrooge going to 70s hell. My partner, Tim, asked me if Scrooge goes to hell in the original. And that's a good question to ask. And I had to say, no. A Diva's Christmas Carol, made in 2000 and starring Vanessa Williams as still Scrooge. Her name is still Scrooge, but her first name is Ebony instead of Ebenezer. The premise of this one is that Ebony Scrooge is a singer and celebrity who's very full of herself, and then she decides to host a charity concert on Christmas Day at the last minute, she will be pocketing the vast majority of the charity funds. So then it's just everybody, like all the ghosts and stuff, convincing her that she needs to actually respect Christmas. I'll just get right to it. It's not a good film in the traditional sense, but it's fun. It's really fun to watch. It's especially fun to watch with friends. I actually digitally, like virtually co-watched this with a friend of mine, and it was really funny to watch with another person and just be like, sorry, did that just happen? Did the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come just wind up being, and I swear to God, a VH1 behind the music? Let's talk about the least likable character in this film. His name is Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit in this one is not only the employee of the Scrooge character, he also serves as the Belle. He is also Scrooge's ex. So picture, if you will, you are Mrs. Cratchit in this adaptation. Your son is dying of a completely mysterious illness. They say, like, doctors have no idea what's going on with him. He just keeps getting worse and worse, and he looks worse and worse. And your husband is working a tour for his ex-girlfriend and refuses to come home to help with the dying son situation. Are you sure? Are you sure I'm supposed to like him? The Ghost of Christmas Present is played by one of the members of Duran Duran. Overall, I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. It's not a good film, but it's a really fun film to watch. The very last line spoken in the movie is, and I quote, "Nobody pees on the Diva." May that truly be said of us and all of us. Hey, what's up? I'm coming at you live from what feels like a milestone. I was approaching my kitchen and my cat Pancake, you probably just, oh, here she comes poking around. My cat Pancake was just wandering around the kitchen as she's wont to do, and then she jumps at something that was not there and sprinted off. Pancake, come on. And for one moment, I thought to myself, oh no, Marley's ghost is about to show up to come yell at me. There you have it, everybody. I did it. I scared myself by watching A Christmas Carol too many times. Ask me what I was. Oh, she does not want to be here. Mr. Scrooge to See You is a film about Scrooge being magically teleported to the year 2013, where a businessman named Timothy Cratchit VI is trying to buy out a diner run by a woman named Belle Dickinson. So then Scrooge has to show Cratchit VI the error of his ways, while also navigating the present day. So the concept itself is so bananas that I don't need to get into like anyone's performances or anything like that. For a movie about time travel, they don't do the best job of keeping their timeline straight. Scrooge refers to the United States as the colonies, even though A Christmas Carol takes place well after the American Revolution. We're talking decades later, at least. There's this whole awkward bit where Belle works with a Hispanic woman, and in her interaction with Scrooge, he's like, "You have a very peculiar accent," and it's like, oh, cool. I mean, it's accurate, not accurate that her accent is weird, but accurate that he would say that, but it still feels weird. But then, later on in the movie, while Scrooge is learning about the present day, she teaches him Spanish, and then he becomes fluent in Spanish, and it doesn't serve any of the plot points in the movie. It's just a really nice character note that he just decided to pick up Spanish while he was in the present day. I don't know. I thought it was a nice little gem in what was otherwise a challenging film, spiritually. And I mean spiritually because it was also a very Christian film. I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 10. It could have been like a 0 out of 10 or something, but it's fun to watch with friends, which I was fortunate enough to do via a watch party situation with 2 of my best friends. We have sort of just been knocking out the ones on the streaming website together, and it's fun. That one was fun to watch with them. Because it's a disaster. I do want to make that absolutely crystal clear. So there's one adaptation just called A Christmas Carol, released in 2020, and it doesn't have any like distinguishing characteristics that I can point people to. Here's the only note that I took about it. And you know what? I really stuck the landing back there. It's getting like a -5 out of 10 or something. I don't even know if the scale works like that, and I don't care. Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, with the leading role of Scrooge being played by Mr. Magoo. I was not familiar with the Magoo-niverse before watching this, but, you know, he's nearsighted and it gets him into antics, and then he goes on stage and does an incredible job, and every once in a while somebody makes a remark about him being nearsighted. And that's really the only change. It's cute. It's cute. It's very cute. The animation style is just gorgeous. I mean, like, it's of its time period, of course, so you get, like, money being tossed into something and then it just vanishes, stuff like that. But I really didn't care because it's just fun to look at. And that's what art's about, baby. I love the duet between Scrooge and his younger self. It was just a lovely, lovely, lovely bit of storytelling, and it was cute. What was interesting about this one is that the Ghost of Christmas Present shows up before the Ghost of Christmas Past. I have no idea why they did it. It doesn't serve the film in any particular way. It doesn't hurt it either, other than just me being confused. Also, there's an entire musical number that takes place in the future where the people who pawn off Scrooge's possessions sing about how they're despicable bad people. And pretty much every adaptation, Scrooge asks in the future, like, oh, what do these apparitions have to do with me? And I was really thinking that during the musical number, like, I'm watching A Christmas Carol. Why do I need, why would I need some song about somebody else also being bad? Do they get ghosts as well? I've been thinking about this. Is a ghost distributed to, like, every person who's been bad, but they all think, like, oh, if I tell anybody, they're not gonna believe me? So, like, does everybody at some point get a ghost? The whole present and past being switched up thing knocked this down a couple of points for me, honestly, because I was like, why? So it's for that reason I'm giving this a 7.5 out of 10. But a 75% is still pretty good, I think. C's get degrees. A Christmas Carol, 1999, starring Patrick Stewart as a Scrooge who needs some redemption, like, now. And I know they all do character-wise, and this is not a condemnation of Patrick Stewart as a person, because I don't know what his deal is, but, like, oh boy, his Scrooge is a very particular and precise brand of cruel. He doesn't have to prove anything to anybody, which makes it all the more delicious when he is redeemed, because in the beginning, he is going through life with extreme amounts of confidence and, like, knowing exactly what he's doing, and then you just see him absolutely stumbling through everything in the redemption scene. Like, he starts to gag, and then it turns out that gag is actually him laughing again. For the first time in years, if ever. Also, as a side note, during the Marley scene, he wears a quilted robe, and it has a very lovely design on it, and first of all, I would kill anything for a quilted robe after watching that. It looks so cozy, but then he's got a little nightcap that doesn't exactly match because it doesn't have the pattern, so it's not the set, but it's the same color, implying that Scrooge got the robe and then went, all right, I need a cap that matches this. And I just love that little character. That's so cute. This is one adaptation where Marley addresses the fact that he's showing up to Night of All Nights, and the answer is, I've been next to you the whole time, Scrooge, and been watching you, and I don't know why I'm appearing to you tonight. That's a spooky answer. This adaptation had hands down my favorite Ghost of Christmas Present. Like, oh my god! Like, he has some devastating lines in the original that are absolutely cold in this one. He balances both letting Scrooge know that Christmas is a time of joy and all of that and caring for your fellow man, and then reminding Scrooge that he hasn't done that at all. Ugh, he's so good. It just watch his surplus population scene and you're gonna feel bad. That said, speaking of the Ghost of Yet to Come had human hands. Like, straight up human, like, white person hands. And I didn't realize how much I didn't want that until I saw it. This adaptation also had the best ignorance and want scene, but my spicy hot take about A Christmas Carol is that I don't really think that metaphor in the original text works. So I'm not sure that there is a way to have the intended sentiment land with the words Dickens chose to use. Sorry, Charles. Sorry, Chuck. I give this one a 9 out of 10. I would definitely say Patrick Stewart and George C. Scott are both currently my favorite Scrooges for completely different reasons. So check them both out. So Scrooge and Dick Wilkins were doing it, right? For anybody who hasn't been watching now 12 adaptations of A Christmas Carol back-to-back, Dick Wilkins is Scrooge's co-worker at Fezziwig's, so this would be like in the past. And I feel like those two were definitely doing it. In fact, here I have text evidence. This is from the original Christmas Carol, and Charles Dickens laying this out. Scrooge says, "Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, yes. There he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear." That's how you talk about your college ex. Scrooge goes out into the real world, gets an apprenticeship right out of school, just absolutely explores his sexuality in the most righteous ways with Dick. They break up, because college romances be like that sometimes. And then he goes out and starts a business with a guy he probably sleeps with every once in a while as well. I would believe that about Scrooge and Marley too. I'm just gonna ship Scrooge with everyone. Oh, in that canon, then Scrooge and Dick Wilkins probably start. Oh no, wait, sorry, I'm not even gonna edit this part. This is just my realization now that Scrooge and Dick Wilkins were probably doing it so righteously, and then Scrooge met Belle at Fezziwig's celebration, and then dumped Dick Wilkins for Belle, and that's why he says, "Poor Dick, dear, dear," because he feels bad for breaking up with him for Belle. Oh, poor Dick. Scrooged, made in 1988 and starring Bill Murray as the Scrooge character. This is a modern day retelling, and by modern day I mean it was the 1980s, so it is a modern day 1980s retelling of A Christmas Carol. Instead of Scrooge, we've got Frank Cross, played by Bill Murray, who is the president, the youngest president of a television network that is producing a live Christmas Carol performance on Christmas Eve, and then he gets haunted by the three ghosts, and the rest sort of pans out approximately the usual Christmas Carol beats, which I found super interesting. At first, when my partner Tim and I were watching it, we were like, oh, okay, so like A Christmas Carol, the story, exists in this world, and then the main guy's friend comes up dead and is like, you're going to be visited by 3 ghosts. And he doesn't really super bring up that it is, beat for beat, a Christmas Carol situation. He just sort of experiences it and, like, knows, like, oh, okay, next up, like, oh, you're yet to come, aren't you, and stuff. Like, it just sort of happens to him in media res. And whereas if I feel like if that happened to me, knock on wood, I'm hoping I don't get Marley'd, but if that happened to me, I feel like off the bat I'd be like, oh, okay, so this is a Christmas Carol thing, right? Maybe Charles Dickens just thought that all billionaires should get visited by ghosts, and I don't disagree with him. As an artist and storyteller myself, I try to avoid the whole, like, oh, what drugs were they on when they did this thing? Because usually it's just, like, they weren't on drugs, they're just being creative. And I definitely I'm still not like, oh, what drugs were they on when they made Scrooged either. The only word I can really use to describe the overall energy of the movie and the mood and the tone is cocaine. Bill Murray has this, like, 10-minute monologue at the end where I genuinely think that Bill Murray just kept going. Like, there was a certain point that was scripted, and I feel in my heart that he just kept going. That's the energy the entire time. The Ghost of Christmas Past was fine, probably funny. There were 1 or 2 moments with him that I definitely, like, laughed out loud during. The Ghost of Christmas Present was just absolutely beyond my understanding, out of control. Carol Kane was just playing in the space back there. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come was iconically designed. Instead of the Belle character, we have Claire, who is like a lost fling of Frank, and she comes back into his life after he calls her post the Marley scene. And then she comes back into his life and they, like, make up again. And I personally don't feel that the Christmas Carol plot is served with the Belle character being a continued presence in the Scrooge character's life. I feel that Belle leaving Scrooge is a opportunity that he lost and cannot return because of his past actions, and all he can do now is continue to try to be a better person without considering that is something that he can gain back. When you are improving as a person, there are some things in life that you lose and you don't get anymore because you made a mistake and that mistake happened, and you just have to work to be a better person despite that. Anyway, I give this one a 8 out of 10. There's just so many chaotic energies, and it was really funny, and I did enjoy myself a lot. I just think that some of the plot points could have, like, used a little tweaking. Carol's Christmas, starring Tom Everett Scott and Wallace Shawn, made in 2004. Alan Carroll is a greeting card writer who is jaded against Christmas thanks to an awful breakup that he had about 4 years ago. On Christmas Eve night, he is visited by several ghosts, who all got the wrong address. They weren't supposed to visit him, they were supposed to visit his neighbor, Zeb Rosecog, that's it. Zeb Rosecog, who was the CEO of his greeting card company and is now just an absolutely horrible neighbor, and just not great human being. Unable to convince the ghosts that he is in fact not Rosecog, Carol then watches all of Rosecog's past, present, and future, and learns a little about himself along the way. This is one of the more selfless Christmas Carol adaptations because it centers around our protagonist not learning about his past so that he can change his ways. It's about learning about someone he despises. The usual Scrooge redemption arc at the end, which usually takes like 5 minutes and it's just like, all right, cool, Merry Christmas, bye. This was a solid half hour of a man helping another man just because he wanted to help. It stood to benefit him in absolutely no way, but he just did it because he wanted to help Zeb. Also, I gotta hand it to Wallace Shawn because I did cry during this one. More than I've cried during any of the other Christmas carols so far. And it was because of Wallace Shawn's performance. I'll be perfectly honest, I would pay any amount of money to just watch Wallace Shawn play Scrooge in a just regular old adaptation of A Christmas Carol. I want to see that happen. Spirit! I am not the man I once was! Tell me I can sponge out the writing on that stone! End scene. That's what it would look like if Wallace Shawn played the carol. This one has a lot of 2004 jokes. Take it or leave it. Jacob Marley is played as a stereotypical Jamaican man because apparently Jacob Marley's grandson went to Jamaica, so Bob Marley is a descendant of Jacob Marley. So that's in the world of the story. The Ghost of Christmas Past is a Jewish man, and they he actively has like a whole 5-minute bit about being a Jewish man. And then he says if he loses his job, he's going to go to hell. He says he's going to go back to hell, which is important. Because otherwise, it seems like he didn't do anything wrong in his life. So this is a universe in which this Jewish man goes to hell. And there's also 12 scenes where somebody just falls down and everybody is watching them and that's supposed to be comedy because it was 2004, I give this one a 4 and I give it a 7. Both of them exist at the same time. Those are both my score. 1935's Scrooge, where the role of Scrooge is played by Seymour Hicks. I really like in the scene where he is trying to trick Bob Cratchit into thinking he's still mean at the end, and then he's like, just kidding, you're not fired, haha. While he's being mean, he looks really stern, and then after every line, he'll be like, Bob Cratchit, why were you late? Like he's a little stinker boy. I just love that energy. I really love the portrayal of Belle in this one because she walks in on Scrooge swindling somebody and gets angry and passionate and hurt, and her deciding to break off with him is very in the moment. Whereas in what I've seen, usually it's more deliberated, calculated, and stuff like that. And I really love that energy. That said, in this film, Belle has 20 kids with another guy. I want you to imagine 20 kids and what you think that looks like. Just really take a moment, because when I was watching the movie, I thought maybe it was a children's birthday party or a Chuck E. Cheese, and then it turned out to just be her household. I mean, get it, girl, but still. What disappointed me about this adaptation is that there's not a lot of ghosts. And you're thinking to yourself, well, Christmas Carol has ghosts. Do you mean to say that they omitted a ghost, like Marley doesn't show up or something? No, Marley appears to Scrooge, but it's only his voice, and he actively says, only you can see me, Scrooge. Which I think is a cop-out, because we're enjoying this film and this story from Scrooge's perspective, right? That's how a lot of storytelling works, is that we're sort of being led by this protagonist's experience. So show me what he sees. Show me ghosts. I want to see ghosts. And then the past, you can't really see at all, just sort of like a very, very vague figure. And then future, they did some really cool shadow stuff, actually, I'll admit. Some really cool, artistic looking stuff. And then present is just a guy. So, what are the rules? Can other people see present? I want to see ghosts. It's Christmas Carol. I want ghosts. Show me ghosts. I would give this Christmas Carol a 6.5 out of 10. If you like A Christmas Carol, you'll probably like this one. It's fine. I would say it is exactly middling. Though Fezziwig isn't in it, so that's also a little disappointing. If I hear the song Hark the Herald Angels Sing one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. It's not in the original text. I checked, but that song is in basically every adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Why? Is it the most public domain carol? I don't understand. Why does it keep happening? It is with a heavy heart I announce that in order to take this next step, I had to welcome back a part of my life that I had long abandoned. Doctor Who. Christmas Carol, a Doctor Who episode released in 2011 and starring the 11th Doctor, aka Matt Smith, follows him as he tries to rescue a vacation spaceship that is crashing into a planet whose skies are controlled by a moneylender and just generally greedy guy named Kazran Sardik, who is played as well as one could by Michael Gambon. There's 4,000 people on this ship, and they're all gonna die really soon, and Kazran, it refuses to do anything to help. So then the Doctor interferes with his past, his present, and his future in order to help him to see the light and help out this crashing spaceship with 4,000 people in it. So there could be a lot of stuff I could point out about this episode. There's pros and there's cons, I guess. I would argue more cons than pros. But I really want to focus in on what makes this episode completely miss the point of A Christmas Carol and of, I don't know, humanity in general. A Christmas Carol, and most of its iterations, are the tale of how one man truly believes that he does not need to involve himself with mankind, that his greed only serves to benefit himself, and anything else it does is of absolutely no consequence to him. Then he learns that all of his actions, positive or negative, are a part of mankind and stand to alter it in some way, that he is a member and needs to contribute accordingly and love those around him. This episode, on the other hand, does not really follow those beats. Yes, Kazran is a moneylender, and yes, his business of lending money has some challenging implications to it, but that business is entirely separate to his control of the sky and his refusal to control it in a way that saves the lives of 4,000 people. And I will absolutely 100% say that death is a byproduct of greed. All of the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musks of the world are killing people through their greed by hoarding wealth. This is just a fact. However, that's not the moral here, because Kazran's decision does not come from a place of greed. It comes from a place of not caring. This is a tale of a man who actively participates in the death of 4,000 people directly, simply because he does not care not to. That is a completely different moral than the Christmas Carol, and in fact is not something that most people can apply to their lives. The Jeff Bezos aren't watching and going, oh, right, maybe I should change my life. They're saying, oh, well, that one guy, who, by the way, in the story, is a victim in the cycle of parental abuse, including physical, which we see on screen, is a mass murderer. That's not me, though. Who learns from this? Who benefits from this story? Anyway, this first foray back into the world of Doctor Who really just solidified the reason why I left the fandom in the first place. Stephen Moffat is not a good writer. He doesn't know how to write people. He cares more about his characters sounding cool than actually being people, making the Doctor a huge jerk. Moffat's a huge sexist. He's got a lot of other stuff going on besides that. It manifests in all of his work, and he ruined Doctor Who. Maybe we can get some ghosts to visit him. Oh yeah, 1 out of 10. Heck you, Moffat. Bugs Bunny's Looney Christmas Tales, which one of the segments is A Christmas Carol, essentially. Made in 1979, starring Yosemite Sam as Ebenezer Scrooge and Tweety Bird as Tiny Tim. This adaptation clocked in at roughly 8 or 9 minutes, making it definitely the shortest adaptation that I've encountered so far. And I was thinking, oh wow, they're really gonna have to streamline the story beats because Mickey's Christmas Carol and all those cut it real short, and they're 25 minutes long. What they did instead was just sort of have the Looney Tunes characters play in the space around the story of A Christmas Carol, which I think was the correct decision. It's just Bugs Bunny tormenting Yosemite Sam for a while. Yosemite Sam's redemption arc simply comes from Bugs Bunny showing up in like the ghost sheet with holes in it and saying that if Yosemite Sam doesn't start being nice, Bugs Bunny was going to send him to hell. He doesn't say hell, but it's very directly implied, which is a very strong move on Bugs Bunny's part. And then he says, "Ain't I a little Dickens?" which really just skyrockets the score up to, I would say, like a 7.5 out of 10. It's not really very much of a Christmas Carol, but it's fun. If you're just looking for a quick and easy, fun little thing that's related to Christmas Carol, you got it. A Christian Carol. Cards on the table, honesty hour, all that. I am not a Christian. I was raised Christian. I have religious trauma from my time in Christianity, directly related to my queer and transgender identities, among other things. I have been an atheist for a long time, just putting my bias out there on the table to say that my intention with this critique is in no way to condemn Christianity or any other religion. I am not here to tell people like, oh, there's no God, beep, beep, beep. I sincerely, really, truly do not care to do that. It's the last thing on my heart. I will be pointing out what I believe to be harmful messaging within this movie that I do truly believe that the Christians in my life will agree is harmful messaging. This is a tale of a manager of a nondescript business named Carol, who does not seem to care about any of her coworkers, does not care about Christmas. The company is all like, oh, we're celebrating nondescript holiday season, as if any company has ever done that before. Carol is then visited by 3 notable members of the Bible, and then she eventually accepts Jesus into her life, and that's the end of the story. Going into it, that all just seems like straightforward stuff. Like, this is just very obviously a delivery method for this tale of Jesus and all of his very cool stuff. Here's where my problems come up. And the major ones are twofold. So let's talk about number 1. So in the beginning of the story, Carol encounters her sister, Grace, who Carol had given a job at her company, but then Grace decided to leave the company in order to be a stay-at-home mom and help her husband, who is a pastor, with his congregation and all of that, which in and of itself is a perfectly fine decision for a person to make. However, my problem lies in the fact that the character of Grace takes up the Fred slot of the Christmas Carol tale. Fred's responsibility in the story of A Christmas Carol is to provide exposition that Scrooge cares so little about mankind that he doesn't even care about those who are meant to be the closest to him, his blood relatives. And Scrooge even mocks the idea of Fred being in love with anyone, feeling love for others. The Fred scene is just the place where Scrooge goes to inform people that not only does he care about money, he cares about money more than he cares about love. That's the overall message of the Fred scene. That's something that, from the Scrooge perspective, is encouraged. People should be following what Fred is doing and loving their fellow man. Having Grace's very specific decision to leave her job to become, quote, a helpmate to her husband, and to bear and raise a child, to have that take the Fred slot sort of encourages that that is the way one's life should go. That is the way that Carol's life should be going as a woman. And again, that is not me saying that pursuing parenthood of any type is not feminism, is sexist, is misogynist. Like, I am not saying that. What I am saying is that having a central point of your story be that people should do that is. Now for the part that made me scream and scream and scream. Content warning for ableism. So the Tiny Tim character, and I have to call him the Tiny Tim character because they didn't give him a name. And you're gonna find out really soon why that's even worse than you think. Carol goes to the present day with John the Baptist, right? And while she's there at her sister Grace's church, Grace goes into labor prematurely. And Carol, watching, asks Present, aka John, if the baby is going to be okay, if the child is going to live. And Present says that the baby will live and that it will live a long and full life with parents and a heavenly Father who loves him. Great, everything is sounding all good. And then we get to the future where, plot twist, because it is presented as such, the Tiny Tim character has Down syndrome. And Carol indignantly says, John told me that the baby was going to be okay. What kind of a life is this for him? Which is ableism. And then Paul says that despite Tiny Tim's condition, he will go on to serve God in his own unique ways, which is also ableism. What is presented in this film is just two different flavors of ableism, having it be a plot twist where, oh my god, wait, the baby was supposed to be fine, not disabled, and also, even though this child is disabled, God's gonna use him, so don't worry, he still has use. Those are just two different types of ableism. Neither of them are okay. Neither of them are a good message to put in your film. Oh boy, those got me steamed. Okay, I'm just gonna rattle through the rest of my criticisms. I can't be talking this long about a movie that was free on Amazon. They tell the story of the Nativity in both the past and present scenes, and that just feels really redundant. Carol even says at one point that she already heard the story, and just because your movie points out that it's redundant doesn't mean that it's not redundant. So much of the dialogue was just saying a bunch of Christian buzzwords back to back that they just could have swapped out all dialogue with John Mulaney's "the bread of God is bread" bit, and it would have delivered the exact same message. Toward the end of the future scene, and I do feel like I buried the lead here, so I'm sorry, Carol experiences the rapture. She is left behind on Earth, and that is what inspires her decision to kneel before the cross and accept Jesus into her life. That is yet another example of Christmas Carol adaptations where Scrooge only changes for selfish reasons. Your heart is not truly changed if the only reason that you're changing is to avoid doom. The one positive I will give to this film is that there was a dog actor in it, and the dog's name was Suga. They were listed in the credits. I just love Suga very much. I'm giving this film like a -1,000,000 out of 10. I just do not do ableism. I don't do sexism. I don't do them. My surgeon let me take off my compression shirt, so haha, I get to let it ride for these last few. A Christmas Carol, released in 1938 and starring Reginald Owen as a very critical Scrooge, like, just very outright. Some text got made up so he could be more mean. This one starts a different way than the novella does, than the most adaptations do. Instead of coming in from Scrooge's perspective, we come in from Fred's perspective. And I think that was an incredibly strong decision that helped aid the film and help the audience really get a sense for how nasty Scrooge is, not just by looking at him and going, oh wow, he sure is doing bad stuff, but by setting up how lovely the world is around him when he's not there, and then how quickly it turns sour the second he shows up. Like, I was disappointed to see Scrooge because everybody was having such a good time. That's a strong feeling to start off with. Also, Fred was just so lovely in this one. He was just charming and sweet and kind and, I don't know, helped kids do ice slidey stuff. It was very cute. That said, speaking of adaptation changes, Belle is not mentioned at all, so it just looks like Scrooge had a really good past, and then he just started not liking Christmas for no reason. Overall, I give this one a 7 out of 10. There were choices that were made that made it stronger than a lot of other adaptations, and then there were choices made that completely undercut that. Christmas Carol, the movie, made in 2003 and starring in the role of Scrooge, Simon Callow, and in the role of Marley's ghost. Hold on, let me check my notes. Marley's ghost. That would be Nicolas Cage.
Oh, dear me, Ebenezer. I don't have much time, Ebenezer. I am doomed. No.
This is yet another adaptation where they decided that the Belle character, literally Belle this time, does come back into Scrooge's life in some way. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it never makes the plot any stronger, and in this particular case, it completely halts the action of the Scrooge redemption scene, because usually that's a very joyous scene where he's running around like, Merry Christmas everybody, oh my god! But then he gets to Belle and it's just like, I'm sorry I did big bad. And that big bad also made the hospital shut down and your doctor boss go to jail. To go from that to Scrooge tricking Bob Cratchit, which is a scene that only sometimes lands in general, but especially only lands if he's been off his gourd joyful this entire time. It just mega doesn't work this time. Especially since he has 2 mice sitting on his shoulders. I'm gonna talk about the mice for a while here. Every movie for children has to have them, I guess. An animal that they can look at and be like, oh look, an animal, great. This one has a mouse named Gabriel and their friend, another mouse, and they just go to everybody in the story. The mouse is even friends with Scrooge, and Scrooge treats these mice really well. Like, there's a scene where Scrooge pours cold water on Tiny Tim and a bunch of carolers in the middle of winter. And then in the next scene, he's like, ah, yes, of course, mice, you can have this little cheese. I feel like his redemption should have just been like, Scrooge, you know that feeling that you have about mice? Just pretend humans are mice. And having the mice play such an integral, almost like narrative point of view role in the film is only made worse by the fact that they're not technically the framing device for the movie. Oh no, the framing device is that the Charles Dickens is reading A Christmas Carol to a theater audience in America. So just picture yourself. It's the early 1860s. You bought a ticket for the theater to go see the actual Charles Dickens read his famous novella, A Christmas Carol, a story that has been in publication at this point for 20 years. And then the dude just starts talking about mice. And he does not stop talking about mice the entire time, because those mice are really everywhere in the movie. So it's just you watching Charles Dickens be like, and then the mice were friends with Scrooge. And then it's not even until the end that Dickens is like, oh, that deviated a little bit from my original. And it's like, yeah, bud. Anyway, just some quick nitpicky stuff. The animation frame rate is like 2. I was glad that in this one they actually showed Tiny Tim as having some sort of respiratory illness or any illness that isn't, oh no, he uses a crutch. They managed to make ignorance and want even more confusing than it is in the original. So congratulations, I didn't know that anyone could do that. I'm giving this one a 2 out of 10. And both of those points are for my man Nick Cage. An All Dogs Christmas Carol, made in 1998. And in fact, this was the final installment of the All Dogs Go to Heaven series. So if you're familiar with that, you might know some of these characters. There's crossover. If not, it's okay. This is all really straightforward. Sure, the whole thing is dogs. That's sort of the bit. But this otherwise follows the plot beats of A Christmas Carol pretty effectively. You know, all the dogs are hanging out together and having a wonderful Christmas together, but Scrooge, aka Carface, the villain in the original one, and his sidekick Killer show up to collect debts from all the dogs, and all the dogs are like, you can't collect debts, it's Christmas. And he's like, I don't care, I want these bones, because the bones are their money, I guess. And then just as it happens in the usual Christmas carols, Carface blows on an enchanted whistle that forms a green smoke dragon and hypnotizes all the dogs into giving all of their possessions over to Carface. But then it turns out that that whistle is just the beginning, because Carface is not his own boss. Oh no, he works for a demon witch named Belladonna, who is making a huge whistle that will hypnotize every dog in San Francisco with the stroke of midnight to steal their owners' gifts so that their owners will kick them out of their homes on Christmas, just like how Carface's owners kicked them out when he was a puppy. In order to save the day, 2 of the dogs from the original are visited by an angel and given a magical tag to use in whatever way they need to in order to save Christmas, provided that it's not just using the tag to locate the dog whistle, which is hidden in the one spot in San Francisco no one would ever guess: Alcatraz Island. Then they Christmas carol Carface, and then they have to leave him to make the decision whether or not to activate the mega hypno whistle thing, which he does do, but then he changes his mind later, so good, I suppose. In the end, the demon and an angel fight over the souls of these 2 dogs, and good wins because she uses snow to defeat the demon witch, so then everybody's like, wow, it's snowing, so Carface really did do the right thing. And that's the end. I mean, that just follows the beat of every A Christmas Carol. This film employs a rather bananas framing device to lead us to the Christmas Carol bit. It's madness, 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 madness. Stop, we gotta do A Christmas Carol real quick. Alright, Christmas Carol is done. Madness, madness, madness. It's like a sandwich where the inside of the sandwich is made of like lettuce and tomato and all the usual stuff that's in a sandwich, and then the bread was made out of Baja Blast. Overall, I give this one a 4 out of 10. It has the potential to be like so bad it's good, but I don't even know if it quite hits that mark. I cannot think of a single world in which I would make a video about watching 25 Christmas Carol adaptations without bringing up the absolute OG, the one that did it for all of us, Muppet's Christmas Carol. Released in 1992, starring Michael Caine as Scrooge, and just so many Muppets. I have an incredibly strong bias toward this film, which I assure each and every one of you that I will be taking absolutely no steps to correct during my review of this. And I could talk forever about how the songs are all bops, the humor is still hilarious, and it's still such a quotable movie, how every Christmas Carol adaptation should have Dickens as a character because in the original, Dickens' narration has some of the funniest lines in the story. I could talk about how the ghosts in this one have a very underrated design based on the original descriptions in the novella. I could talk about all those, and it would be easy. However, I would like to take this time to defend Michael Caine, because a lot of the criticism of his performance that I have heard have been not on his acting abilities or how he plays Scrooge, but on his vocal performance as a singer during whatever times he sings in this one. I'll be the first to admit that his tone is a little nasally. He gets to the pitch for sure, but it's not the strongest singing performance anyone has ever done. I will grant that, absolutely. But, and here's my big take about the Muppets Christmas Carol, Michael Caine being not a great singer not only doesn't hurt the film, it actually helps with the storytelling. So musical theater, as I'm sure people have observed at some point or another in all of our lives, is a very particular style of storytelling. It uses musical numbers in order to express heightened emotions, be them positive or negative. You don't really find musical theater numbers about, like, how fine that salad was, but you wish there was a little bit more raspberry vinaigrette. Likewise, this Scrooge, and I would say a lot of Scrooges, don't have very heightened emotions at the beginning. Their emotions are toward a general disdain for mankind, a lack of care for Christmas and whatever it is, and just disinterest in all of it. Grumpy, but disinterest. It's for this reason that in the beginning of A Muppet's Christmas Carol, Scrooge does not sing at all. Michael Caine does not sing one single note. And I think that's for the best. If you'll think back to the 1970s Christmas Carol, you know, the one where Scrooge went to the stylized 70s hell with the sweaty men and the chains, that one, Scrooge has a song in the beginning of the movie about how much he hates people. I think it might be called I Hate People. And in watching it, it just doesn't feel like it fits for Scrooge to be singing at all. Alternatively, the first musical number in A Muppet's Christmas Carol is everybody else around him singing about how Scrooge is bad. It establishes a clear line between Scrooge and everybody else. The first time that Scrooge sings in Muppet's Christmas Carol is in a scene that has recently been refound. The Love Is Gone scene, the song that Belle sings to break up with Scrooge in the past. In this song, which you can find if you just pause the movie, then go to YouTube and look up the song and then just like rewatch and go back and start the movie again. It's what I do every time and I highly recommend it. Michael Caine as Scrooge stands behind Belle, unseen and unheard, and spits out lyrics while crying. He's trying to sing along with her. He's an old man who is trying to understand his past mistakes and trying to connect with this woman that he failed to connect to as a youth, to lead with his heart, to feel an emotion and express it. And no, his voice doesn't sound good. It sounds like he's an emotional wreck and he's crying. He still doesn't sing again until the very end, but we'll get to that, because in the present day, there's this whole musical number about how Christmas is a time of giving and sharing and like talking about how great Christmas is, and it is a full-blown musical number. Everyone's singing and dancing and all of that, and Scrooge is just watching and looking at it, and then Present comes up to him and starts up a little shimmy type dance with him, and Scrooge very stiffly joins in. Again, he is not used to expressing human emotions in this heightened way of musical theater. He is not within the world yet, but he's getting there. But it's a rough start. So he's stumbling in there, but he's having a good time, and he's feeling for the first time how great it can be to share in that with other people. And then we get to Scrooge's redemption scene, which has his big solo number in it about how his heart has changed and he is a different man and he has chosen joy in his life. And yeah, his tone isn't great in it. He makes it. He gets to the notes for sure. It's not the strongest performance, and that's why it's the strongest performance. This is the first time Scrooge is not only participating in mankind, but in a way that everyone else can see. He has taken the training wheels off, and he's going for it. And it's not great, and he's wobbling, because it's his first time, and it doesn't matter, because he's just embracing this joy. And it will probably take him a few years in order to do it more eloquently, but this is Patrick Stewart gagging out a laugh for the first time, you know? This is effort. This is work. And it's work that Scrooge makes the decision to start today. Having, as I've mentioned before, gone to college for musical theater, and then continuing to work in the field of musical theater today, I truly believe that one doesn't need to prioritize vocal technique over storytelling. If you just want to hear someone sing really good, you can go to a concert. That's not exclusively what musical theater is about. And if you worry less about, oh, did he sing with the right tone? Did he hit, the right notes? Which he does. Then you are going to find one of the strongest performances of Scrooge in any Christmas Carol adaptation. He makes you laugh, he makes you cry, he is cruel, and then he is so overwhelmingly caring. And he's bringing all of that effort to acting alongside Muppets. So I give Muppets Christmas Carol a million bajillion out of 10. Again, I am not going to correct my bias on this one. It is absolutely a timeless classic. It's absolutely wonderful, underrated in its time, and I'm glad that it's getting the recognition that it's always deserved. I just love it so much. If you've never seen it before, make this the year that you do. I made myself some hot apple cider to commemorate the fact that as of today, I have watched 25 A Christmas Carol adaptations in 2 weeks. May nobody else do something that stupid. When I first made the decision to watch as many A Christmas Carols as I could, I made that decision on the day that I did at around 4 p.m. I remember that because the full day prior and a few days before that, I just spent the day laying on my couch. I literally could not move my body. I couldn't find the will to, and even doing that was a labor. I was just sad. I was sad thinking about how many months I've spent trapped in my not that big apartment because I was looking out for my health and the health of other people. I was sad about how much of that could have been prevented had this world not been as greedy and terrible as it often is. I was sad thinking about the holidays coming up that I wouldn't be able to spend with my family, my friends, my loved ones. I was just sad. So then I posted online asking my social circles what Christmas Carol adaptations they thought I should check out. And the response was pretty overwhelming, and from a variety of people. I heard back from people I don't really talk to, people I talk to all the time, people with answers I had never even heard of, a lot of those. I heard recommendations for A Christmas Carol from people I know for a fact don't celebrate Christmas. So what is it about A Christmas Carol? I think it's because stories like A Christmas Carol show us that despite unbelievable, sometimes Dickensian sorrow, the world is full of joy, laughter, charity, kindness, and goodwill. It shows us that our past can be reconciled, our present can be honored where it is, and our future is ours for the making. It shows us that wealth should not be hoarded by a greedy few. It shows us that what is best in humanity is what we are able to share with others. That every story can be improved with the addition of Muppets. Sitting inside of my apartment, watching as many Christmas carols as I can, is in no way comparable to being in the same room as my family, to being able to hug and sing with my friends. But I figured out at some point that I really enjoy hyperfixating on random nonsense and then talking about that nonsense for a bit. And I decided at one point that if joy wasn't going to come to me easily, I was going to find it. And so, to provide a more secular paraphrasing of Tiny Tim's famous words, may we all find blessings, each and every one.